Dan Jones, who's traveled and given up quite a bit, as I mentioned to his wife, so he's getting your husband back. I think that's the good mention. But anyway, a lot of his family is here in the front row, so this is really neat, a great testimony of who fantastic God. So without further ado, Mr. President. The first thing I would like to do is introduce some of these people in the first row. First, my wife, Lynn. Stand up, Lynn. You can't take on this kind of activity for a great organization like this unless you have support at home. And so she has been my support. What I've written, what I've taught, she's always my person to run by first. And sometimes we don't necessarily agree with the final results of the meeting. I think we can make the final decision, but she has been my support along the way. Second, my grandson's wife, Sonia, and Sonia, stand, please. There's nothing to me more important than family after God. And maybe after family, SERRA, but after family. But you know, I have been so blessed. 3 of my children came to Rome to be with me, and 4th one would have been, but his work schedule wouldn't allow it. So he's with me now, and my daughter, who's there in Rome, is also with me now. Tiffany, my daughter, stand up, please. Tiffany is, I don't want to talk about what they do. Tiffany is an attorney. She has a business immigration business. She does a lot of work for the church in Oregon and also does some work in diocese in Alaska. So it's nice to see her be involved with the church.
Yes.
The next is going to be to ask her to join SERRA, right?
She does.
Jim and Terry O'Hammond. Jim and Terry, will you stand up, please? You know, Jim and Terry are, I won't tell you which is which, but one is 90 and one is approaching 90. They came to Italy with me, and they're here now. And you know, Jim he's been a SERRA for 57 years.
Whoa!
We have other people that are here for their first time friends. Dick and Leslie Emery, Art, Sandy Dietrich, our president, Bob Turner, and some other family members. Thank you for attending and supporting. Lastly, I'd like Monsignor Don Buxton to stand. Father Don. Monsignor. In about 2010, when we were in Alaska, he received the Bishop's Cousin Award for Chaplain of the Year. And it was, like I said, he was our chaplain in the Portland SERRA Club for 32 years. Thank you, Father.
Wow.
So, state of SERRA. My journey started in May of 2017.
That's it. That's it.
Okay, where's John?
Here he comes. Here he comes. Help is on the way.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
I told John when we set this up, I said, you know, I'm counting on the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit doesn't work, I'm calling on you. So my journey started in May of 2017. I scheduled a trip to Chicago. There we go again. I'll leave it at that. I wanted to spend some time with SERRA Nashville in the Chicago office with John Liston, our executive director, and find out what my duties would entail. obviously a couple of our office staff, Martha and Sarah. We talked about such things as writing articles for the 4 annual SERRA magazines, the Christmas and Easter message, and where I was expected to travel during my year as president of SERRA International. One of my questions to John was, how often do SERRA International presidents communicate with you in the Chicago office? And interestingly enough, I found an interesting fact that it would vary greatly, sometimes very infrequently, sometimes maybe not at all, and sometimes very frequently. So John and I decided that we would talk at least once a week. So every Tuesday morning for the last year at 9 o'clock in the morning, John and I had a conversation about what was going on in the last week with SERRA and where we needed to go, what we needed to do, what kind of information I needed, and what kind of information he needed from me. So I think communication is a great and important thing. While in Chicago, I was able to spend some time with the United States Council of SERRA, which, as you all know, is one of the 10 councils of SERRA International. And while I was there, we spent some time with people like Mark Pompoulos and Judy Cousins, who you may or may not know is the new president of the United States Council. And I was able to hear for the first time an excellent presentation by Tom Thibodeau on servant leadership. Hopefully you'll hear his talk tomorrow. He's a great speaker. He's got a great message for us. My formal installation as president was in Italy, an excellent SERRA International Conference in Rome, put on by our great Italian SERRAs. And an interesting fact is, you see this relic right here? As you can see in that room, there was no table, and so I was about to give my talk, and so after Dante handed me the relic, I sat it on the floor. And the next morning, as I walked into the room where I was supposed to run my first board meeting as president, John said, "Where's the relic?" And I had this blank look on my face, and I said, "I do not know." Thank God. John went to the hotel office and then back to the room where we were the night before, and sitting on the floor right where I said it was the relic. So I didn't start off by becoming as president very strongly, but the relic is still with me. In fact, it's in the Adoration Chapel right now, and I'll be turning it over to, traveled with me through many places during the last year. I'll turn it over to Mario tomorrow night. Let's see. The sights in ancient Rome are always wonderful, and being with family, Serrans, and friends made it that much better. Here are my children, whose 2 sons and a daughter. My grandson were there in front of the Mass. And then, of course, these are friends, some of which are here today. My father, Mike Beeman on the right there, who was with us in Rome, is a priest who is important now, but spent 23 years as a military chaplain. So a great service to our church. The highlight of the course was shaking hands with the Holy Father, and after saying a few words to him, he looks you straight in the eyes, and as was mentioned earlier today, says, "Please pray for me." To top the convention off, we attended John and Boha's wedding. And an interesting fact, I learned that a color purple shirt is not good to wear when it's very warm. When you're in the sun and you perspire, the purple changes to very dark purple. And then when you get back in the cool area, it turns back to its original color. For the last 3 years, Serrans throughout the world have been teleconferencing and saying the rosary on the last Saturday of each month. And we're going to do that again tomorrow morning. Everybody's aware, and hoping. How many have participated in this rosary? Okay, I hope next year when we ask the same question in Mexico, everybody raises their hand. It's a great, great event. Sometimes the noise is a little disturbing, but God has got to be listening to us, and it's a great event. Thank you, Tim O'Neill, for getting it started. So Tim O'Neill started this Vocation Rose last Saturday each month, and President Dante Benini and I have continued. Increasing communication was one of my main goals. So it seemed to me that having Sarah's on the line for the Rosary was a great opportunity to keep them a little longer for a town hall meeting. So during the last year, we have discussed things like vocations, communication, membership, the SERRA Foundation, the SERRA Rally, webinars, this Nashville Convention, Spark, which again you've heard some already about, the SERRA Promotion and Resource Kit. Please attend Judy Cousins' presentation tomorrow. You'll learn more. It's a great program. It's many programs that many of you are aware of and some that you're not. And it's all in one source. It was put together by the United States Council for the vocation directors. It was presented to the vocation directors, and then it was presented to the United States bishops. So great program, just showing all the things that SERRA does do, not could do, but does do. So please attend that. We also had then a Franciscan 7-decade Rosary, leadership, and a program with emphasis on holiness. And actually I have to go back and say the leadership really didn't take place. It was scheduled, but John and I kind of miscommunicated, and we didn't have that town hall on leadership. But back to holiness, I think the Holy Spirit was at work as Pope Francis on March 19th of 2018 came out with his apostolic exhortation, Gaudete Exsultate, on the call to holiness in today's world. And we all know that that's one of our missions. In that document, Pope Francis says, we're all called to be holy by living our lives with love and by bearing witness to everything we do. Wherever we find ourselves and further on, we should not grow discouraged before examples of holiness that appear unattainable. The important thing is that each believer discerns his own path and brings out the very best of themselves, the most personal gifts that God has placed in their hearts. Over the past year, we have tried to establish better communication. Our first, with the SERRA Council President, our first teleconference call had only 3 people in attendance, and that was John Liston and Larkins from Australia and myself. But subsequent conferences had more and better participation. We had a face-to-face meeting at the SERRA Rally in Phoenix in January, and 3 issues have come out of these communications. One is that it is essential to have communication, regular face-to-face with SERRA Council Presidents. 2 is that all councils need to receive written communication on a regular basis, probably at least quarterly, and John already has started that process. Just as all council presidents are then asked to give us a written report of what's going on in their council, and that was in the board book that your board of delegates looked at yesterday. And third, to translate as much communication as possible in all 4 languages, certainly for the international conference, but also the printed material, always forward, never back, and any other printed material we do. Our first visit with SERRA Nashville was our trip to Vancouver, British Columbia. Where's John again?
Joan, stay there.
Don't leave, Jack.
Our first visit to meet with SERRA Nashville, SERRA's, was a trip to Vancouver, BC. SERRA Vancouver, SERRA's have always been special in our heart being close to the northwest part of the United States, we used to have regional meetings, conferences that would rotate between Seattle, Spokane, Portland, and Vancouver. So Lynn and I took the train to Vancouver in early October and enjoyed a beautiful weekend that included Mass and a meeting with SERRA. As you can see, it was a beautiful weekend, which is not always the case in the Northwest. Any of us living there will tell you that. Beautiful dinner with all of SERRA. We had dinner with Villanova Carvalho, a meeting with Archbishop J. Miller in his new office, and attended an ordination of 2 permanent deacons. An interesting fact about attending this Mass with deacons, we started Mass I think at 1:30, so it was over about 3 or 3:30. This was on a Saturday, and Lynn and I were scheduled to take the train home early on Sunday morning. So the SERRA who was taking us around, we keenly asked Archbishop Miller if that Mass could suffice for Sunday, and of course you know what the answer was, no. So we proceeded to leave that Mass quickly and attend the Mass about at 4 or 4:30 to fill the Sunday. It was a very enjoyable visit with old friends as well as making new acquaintances. One of the things that's always impressed me about Vancouver, BC Serrans is their maroon jackets, which always makes them visible as Serrans. And of course, you know, I had this presented a long time ago, and now the Canadians want to outdo themselves because they're all in red today. But I think that's great. In mid-October of 2017, we were invited to attend a Regional 9 conference in Omaha, Nebraska. Over the years, I've attended several conferences in this region, and I think they've set the bar high, showing how important regional conferences can be, should be, and are. They always have great liturgies, great speakers, and excellent attendance, including this year, Archbishop Emeritus Eldon Curtis. And Eldon Curtis, who is present rector of Mount Angel Seminary in Oregon, where we live, as well as past Episcopal advisor for SERRA International. Great man. The beautiful fact of the weekend was interfacing with all the great Serrans that live in Region 9, many of whom you know. In November of 2017, Lynn and I were able to travel to Brazil for the pilgrimage of the Aparecida and meeting with the Brazilian consul. Our host in Sao Paulo was Alfonso Leononi and his wife Hilda. We were able to tour the city and have a barbecue with their family and fellow Serrans. And of course, Lynn and I are thinking barbecue, you know, probably going to Alfonso's backyard and we start at the barbecue. Well, in Brazil, the barbecue is totally different. You go to a restaurant, you sit down, there's a table with all kinds of foods that you can think of except meat. You eat as much of that as you want. And then the waiters start bringing around meat on skewers, every kind of meat you could possibly think of, and they slice you off a slice of meat, and they'll keep coming back with more meat and different kinds of meat until you say, basta, basta. So it's a beautiful bed and a great Serrans, both Alfonso and Hilda on the right there, and their family as well as Serrans. For the second time as president, I was able to attend a council meeting. Yes. So the next day we departed for Aparecida, which today is literally a city of itself. There's an old church we visited, many shops, including several that were owned by Serrans, whom we were able to meet, and there's also a huge basilica. That's the basilica.
In New England, they have a terrific program. There's two brothers. One is called Click, and the other is called Clack. They run an automobile, a show, and then people call in with all kinds of problems and what have you. They're
So the story of the Parasita is many years ago in the early 1600s, people started bringing religious artists to an area. And actually, I think there was a gold rush. It's a place they used to stop off. But they used to bring religious articles. And one of the articles they brought was a statue of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Over time, her head broke off, and so they threw her in the river. Many years later, some fishermen were fishing, catching no fish. And first they pulled up in their nets the body of the Blessed Virgin. And later, a little later, they pulled up her head. These were now blacks, and they'd been in the mud for years and years and years. They put her back together, and since then, many, many miracles occurred. I think the first one was the fishermen caught so many fish that the boat almost sunk. The other miracle I remember is there was a gentleman that was taking a slave in chains, and they walked by the church, and the slave wanted to stop, so they went into church, and the slave prayed, and all of a sudden all his chains fell off his body. There were other miracles, but they have since built first a church and then a cathedral.
Joan, stay there.
I think the main thing about this Parasita is, there are different shrines throughout the world. The Parasita in Brazil, over 7 million people visited a year. 7 million. And, there were probably, I thought 400 Serrans that were there. I heard it was more like 700. For the second time as my term as president,
No, we're just taking that.
Stay there. And that is the Brazilian.
the second time I term as president, able to attend the SERRA council meeting. The interesting point of that meeting was that it was all in Portuguese. I was asked to sit at the head table for a day-long meeting, and even though Robert Sobral, a fellow Serran, was bilingual, tried to let me know it was difficult, and that's because Robert speaks softly, and I don't hear too well. It certainly gave a much better appreciation of the importance of having translators. An interesting fact, at the day's end, an individual came up and introduced himself in English as Father Dwayne Roy, who had been in Brazil for 30 years, but was from Kansas, USA. There's Father Roy on the left. Interesting fact, as far as Father Roy, a couple months later I was in Phoenix for the SERRA rally, sitting next to a couple from Kansas, and I told him the story about Father Roy. And he kind of laughed and he said, Father Roy was my instructor when I was in high school. The next morning, hundreds of Serrans gathered at the conference room at the Basilica and included a presentation by bishops, vocation directors, and seminarians. And we're starting to see more colors now in the United States and Canada and other places internationally. I thought the Brazilians, just all kinds of colors. Every club had a different color, and the room was absolutely packed. Next one, too, John. So anyway, when I gave my presentation, I was able to give a presentation, obviously in English, and Roberto was going to do the translation, but he decided to ask Father Roy to do the translation. So as I read the paragraph, Father Roy would translate using both my written word and what he had said, and the Holy Spirit was definitely at work. When it came time for Sunday Mass, we escorted to the front row seats in a beautiful round altar, and Father Roy was one of the main celebrants. And this just shows, this place is so big that they park all over the community, hills and every place, and they built this ramp where people can walk down to the facility. I think they say that 25 to 40,000 Mass every Sunday. And on this particular pilgrims, every year that the Brazilian Serrans do, they have about 400 to 700, maybe more, maybe 8. Alfonso said even as many as 8 attend each year. Our trip ended a couple days later with a beautiful escorted tour of Rio de Janeiro by Robert Sobral. The interesting thing, it was a very cloudy day, and the first thing about the cloudy day, it was so warm. I walked out of the hotel when Roberto picked us up the next morning about 10 o'clock, and I had a sport coat on. He said, you want to go back to your room and take that sport coat off? It's cloudy, but it's very, very warm. He was right. Even without a coat, it was very warm. So we had dinner, and the interesting thing, we're sitting for dinner, and my wife was praying. We knew that Jesus sat on the mountain on the top of a hill, but it was so cloudy, it was not present. But during our lunch, the clouds separated, and there was Jesus. Such great hospitality was displayed by enthusiastic Brazilian Serrans. It was a very enjoyable trip. In March of 2018, we were invited to attend the 25th annual Ordinary Dinner of Toronto, Canada by Mario and Luisa Biscardi and Fran Polomar. They were great tour guides. We were provided with a tour of Toronto, included the seminary and the SERRA house. This is Father Joseph said there was a private mass. There was only 4 of us plus Father for a private mass. We also had a tour of the seminary and then lunch with seminarians next. And this is SERRA house, and our tour included a tour of Toronto by Fran and Mario. And this is their SERRA house, and although there was no one living there, this house is close to the University of Toronto, and the seminarians live in this house. This is something that the Serrans in Toronto have done for their community. It's being remodeled now, so no Serrans living there. They're living back at the seminary, but this is where they live normally while they're going to school at the University of Toronto. And then we also had dinner with Toronto, which is always one of the greatest and funnest events, I think, is traveling around the world. It's social events you have with Serrans. It's just gracious people. Next, we also had a tour of Canada, and then we included Niagara Falls. We were able to spend 45 minutes with Eminence Cardinal Thomas Collins, who you met this morning, as you know, is our new fiscal advisor, and I think he's going to be a really great advisor to us. We saw even our high school students get very excited about vocations, which was a real thrill. The highlight of the trip was the dinner event. That's kids. And this is the seminary up there. Moira, Queen, she was the master of ceremonies, did a great job. And it's a great event when we saw firsthand 1,700 people, including priests, sisters, Serrans, and devoted Catholic men and women, celebrate as they do each year. Their seminarians were about to be ordained with priesthood. Okay, in April, Lynn and I will take the long journey to Davao in the Philippines in a semi-annual SERRA Asian conference. We were greeted at the airport not only by SERRA officers, but 5 or 6 seminarians, and taken to the convention hotel. So this is one of the first things we received. We got there. This is ingredients in the airport. And then next. Ingredients at the airport, and then Davao, resort area that we next. We had lunch with the president and his family owned a couple of restaurants. They took a bunch of us out. We had great lunch while they prepared hotel rooms at the parties that were there before we just leaving next room. Yeah, we attended 3 different liturgies. We attended 3 different liturgies. First Mass was celebrated by the Most Reverend Romulo Vallis. We attended Mass at a church run by a cloistered Carmelite nuns who wanted to meet us at Mass. As President of SERRA Nashville, the relic next to him. Sorry about that. So the relics is there. I think the important thing here is that the relic, that's the relic we had during Mass. And next, this, I was very, very impressed by the devotion that the Asian Sarans had to the relic. After Mass, over 200 people came up to kiss the relic. In addition to Lynn and I, John Liston, SI Presidents Dennis Lieber, Dan Grady, and Dr. Chinaron were also in attendance. Next slide. I'm not sure that I've ever attended an event at Sarans where there's so much joy, bright colors, appreciation, and love of life for our Catholic faith. They love to sing and dance and share their deep devotion and the love of Jesus Christ. There's the banners that they have, so the main banner and then banners for each of the clubs. Next. Joseph and family. More. They love to take pictures. It's interesting. This is the club that won the award for having the most Sarans. There were 33 Sarans, and I don't know if you can tell or not, but 28 of them are women. Next. Like I said, they love to sing and dance, and they even got Dan Grady and I up there to do a little dancing. Right, Dan? Beautiful, they did a lot of the dances of their cultures of where they live. Just absolutely beautiful colors and very enthusiastic. It was very, very enjoyable. Okay, get you on there, that's all right. Yes, okay. Another one of the main goals of SERRA, for me, SERRA this year was to emphasize the best practice. On a large scale, the District 9 Regional Convention, the Brazil Pilgrimage, the Sanctuary of the Blessed Lady of Immaculate Conception of Aparecida, Toronto Ordinary Dinners, the Asian Semi-Annual Conference, and this SERRA Conference certainly stand out of my mind. If you have any desire to see some of these events, I would certainly suggest taking part. Now, you are taking part in this one, but the travels to see Sarans throughout the world and some of the events they put on is really well worth your time and effort, and to see the joy and happiness. We heard today several times mention the importance of having happy priests, to having kids see happy priests. I think it's also important for potential Sarans to see happy Sarans. And it was, again, as mentioned today, on the local scale, each of you in your own area have some best practices that are your club does on a regular basis. Please consider writing these up, send in the Chicago office, so we can put in the SERRA magazine on the website. In the area of best practice, we see more in the area of we need to see more in the area of membership. Certainly we see some like St. Louis that has now over 150 members. Houston, where they've done their social dinners and a great increase in membership. Nashville, which has been, one club has been in existence for, I think it's Nashville, for Williamson County for about 5 years. They have over 100 members. Or the SERRA Club in Tri-Cities, where they did a novena for 9 days. They prayed, and they have 9 new members. But many clubs are falling below the 25 limit, and we need to change that. We need to help those clubs increase their membership. And I think you'll hear from our President-elect, Mark Scotty, tomorrow that membership is critical and will be our emphasis. In light of Pope Francis' apostolic exhortation in our SERRA handbook, Call to Holiness, I would ask how many of you have this handbook? Can you raise your hand? Okay. You can buy the handbook. They have copies of it in Valley locations, so I would suggest that you do that.
And they might not charge your card.
Many of us paid 12 or 15. I think I saw the price was $10. So, remember, or if you don't, let me remind you, in Rome, I encourage each of you to ask or invite in 3 areas. The acoustics weren't too good. It seems maybe my presidency is just kind of due to be in situations where either you can't hear me or the electronics don't work. Maybe we could get those fixed. Anyway, the three areas of inviting were: 1, to ask the priesthood and religious life; 2nd, to ask friends to join SERRA; and 3rd is to ask ourselves how we can be more holy. And I think when we do this, we need to then, after we ask, add prayer. Because prayer always needs to, and maybe we should pray first and then ask. Prayer's got to be involved. On page 69 of the handbook, there are some reflections in relation to how to live the SERRA apostolate. Of these 9 questions, but I would like to focus on a few. And again, back to those saying, do I invite appropriate people to consider the priesthood religious life? And maybe in light of some of the things we heard today, we should also go back to our youth, to our schools, and find out, what are you teaching our youth? How are you teaching? What are you teaching our youth as far as praying? Father said this afternoon, we need to start. They start in the 5th grade by learning how to pray well. And 2nd, do I ask others to join SERRA? And then do I let my ego get in the way of SERRA and the work of vocations? And I pulled out that quote from this morning. Archbishop said, temptation can never deliver what it seems to promise. In light of asking or inviting a recent SERRA Portland meeting, we had a newly ordained Holy Cross priest. And he said to our group, regarding statistics about the ask or the invite, he said the first time you ask someone to consider the priesthood, you get about a 10% chance that that person will take some action. If a second different person asks that same person to consider the priesthood, there's now a 30% chance that something will happen. But he will take some action. And 3rd, that if we have a third different person that asks that same person that question, there's a 75% chance that that person will then take some action. I thought these were really interesting statistics, and coming from newly ordained priests, I assume they're true. And even if they're partly true, it seems to me that we as Serrans should use that not only to ask, but if we think somebody is really qualified to be a priest or sister, get someone else to ask. If we have a friend or acquaintance that we think would make a good Serran, not only should we ask, we should seek and ask someone else to ask that person to consider the SERRA Club. Let me finish by telling a story. At a recent priest appreciation dinner in my hometown of Portland, Oregon, I was talking to a retired bishop, Kenneth Steiner, and he pulled out 2 pieces of paper with between 30 and 40 names on that piece of paper. He said, these are all priests that came from one parish. It happens to be All Saints Parish in the east side of Portland. It happened to be where my daughter Tiffany and my grandson Tim. He said, these are, so there were 30 or 40 priests, all from the same prayers. He said, you know, God does the calling. Let me repeat that once more. God does the calling, and we heard that today. But he said what we can do is that we can create a culture where those callings can be nurtured and grow. And I think that's the job of SERRA, to create a culture. And if it's helping our schools to teach our kids to pray, if it's making the family stronger, if it's spending more time with youth, then that's what we need to do. That's the role of SERRA. I think that, to me, really aptly describes what SERRA. We need to help create that culture where God's calling. We know God calls people. We heard this afternoon of a very interesting call, and we all have heard many, many callings from individuals who have joined the priesthood of religious life. It's our job to create that culture where those callings can grow and prosper. In the society, especially in the United States, there's lots of things that discourage kids from hearing the call of God. So I think that's one of the things that we need to do, is create that culture where that calling can grow. Let me close by saying that all the positives during my year as president is certainly because of the Holy Spirit. It's been a cherished privilege and honor to be your servant leader this past year, and how an old farm boy from Snohomish, Washington, ever got to be president of this great organization, oh, God knows. Thank you, and may the grace, mercy, and peace of Jesus Christ be with you each today and each day after. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you again, Dan. Your leadership this year was visionary and also transformative. The town hall meetings that Dan held following the monthly global rosary for vocations were a great way for Sarahs from all around the world to connect, to share ideas, and really it was a microcosm of what's happening here at this convention, where Sarahs are coming together, sharing ideas, and joining in the joyful work for vocations. Now, while we're having a wonderful time here in Nashville, we as Sarahs in the vocations business, our focus must always be on the future. As Sarahs, we're planting seeds that will grow sometimes long after we've moved on to other things. But before we move on from this Nashville convention, I would like to invite Monsignor Carlos Emilio Berlier, Bishop of the Yucatan, and SERRA International past President Alejandro Carvajal, his wife Heli, and Fernando Dosal and his wife Belena up to the stage to talk about something that we have coming up next year for SERRA that I think everyone here is going to be very interested in seeing and attending. Dan, I don't think the tech issues were you.
¿Conocen México?
Ah,
Sí.
sí, sí.
The next year, please go to the Mexico, okay?
Okay, sí.
We have a presentation on next year's convention, which will be in Mexico City. So we have a short video, and then we will hear from the organizing committee of that convention.
One of the largest cities in the world, where history and innovation collide. Where color and tradition give a warm welcome. A city brought to life by millions of people. Home to a large number of immigrants from all over the world. Where faith stands strong, and yet it's challenged every day. It's a city to explore, to live, and to remember forever. This is the city Our Lady chose to stay, and there is no better place for us to gather than in the folds of her mantle. SERRA International Convention 2019, Mexico City.
Dear SERRA friends, I thank God, our Lord, who allowed us to participate in this 76th International SERRA Convention. It is a privilege, by the grace of God, that I have been SERRA chaplain since 1971. It has been a pedagogy, first, growing the friendship with Serrans for long years with common goals. Second, a consistent relationship with priests of different dioceses who work on vocations, promotion for priesthood, and religious life. With its marvelous plurality and richnesses of charismas, they are our priority. The Jesus Christ's love on his call to men and women to give their heart and whole lives to the service of Christ and his church, with a generous and joyful answer. The whole person for long-lasting life. In the fidelity of the answer, yes, to Jesus' invitation, with the confidence that they will learn from Peter the Apostle. His feast is today. In your name, O Lord, I will throw the nets, and they instantly filled with fish. I invite you to be people who pray and place full confidence in Him, who prays, grows, and matures in his confidence. Always forward, never step back. With the great affection, we invite you to come to Mexico next June 2019 to our 77th SERRA International Convention, to be with Our Lady of Guadalupe in the folds of her mantle. Thank you.
Excuse me, I don't speak Spanish and my wife.
Spanish?
English. México tiene mucha cultura.
Has a lot of culture.
México tiene cosas muy bonitas
We have beautiful things.
que nos van a mostrar el año entrante.
We will show them to you next year.
México es olores,
You can
sabores,
smell it, taste it,
colores
colors.
y alegría.
And it's another happy.
Mucha alegría en México. Tenemos a la Virgen de
We have Our
Guadalupe
Lady of Guadalupe,
y casi
and we almost,
nos dice,
she tells us,
canta y no llores.
sing and don't cry.
Ok, repeat after me. Ah, ya, ya, ya.